Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you are having an awesome week. I have a special guest with me today. I have Ben Mallory. He's our lead PM and my right hand. Honestly, I'd be really lost without him. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My return appearance on the Goat Marketing Show. I'm excited to be here.
So I was really excited for today's episode because we've had a really awesome kickoff to this year. We've had a lot of awesome new clients come on board. And with that comes a lot of change in how we manage projects. And one of the things I think a lot of people are going through right now with there's so many articles about, the great resignation. So they're either losing people or people are out sick or, business is booming and they're just not sure how to change it. You've done an amazing job of helping us manage change and implement some new processes, but without feeling restrictive. And I've always been a big believer you need to have process because it makes your company more efficient. But I find at times if you get too wedded to the process and too restricted, you can't help be adaptive to new clients and it just gets too cumbersome. You end up dying anyway. So I want to take some time today to have general conversation about some of the things. This is more of a behind the scenes show, just some of the things we're working on, how it's going to help going forward. And hopefully, both some other agency owners, but as well as some of our clients can help understand how to create some of these processes in their own. So maybe just give us a bit of intro and then just tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
For sure. So I've been, like you said, I joined the company kind of the end of last year, and there was a lot of change and new clients. We obviously Giant Goat had processes in place, and my predecessor left a lot of great documentation for me to follow. But as we move into the new year and the new environment of digital marketing and just the new environment of business, those things change on almost a day-to-day basis. So what I've been working on is kind of putting together something where we can visualize everything that's going on in the organization. So right now, starting with a Trello board, just so we can see task-based items and give you, myself, and anyone in the organization an idea of what's going on. And then when we get into a situation where we start to feel the burn a little bit of pressure, a little bit of chaos, the thing that's really worked for me is just being super honest with both the client and my coworkers about any situations and just trying to figure out what works best. So whether that's scheduling a kickoff with a client or an internal meeting, and just keeping that communication flowing forward so that no one is left unread for days and no one has any excuse of I don't know what's going on or what do we do next.
And one of the things I want to applaud you with, as well as Nithya, who's normally on the show with us, is how well you communicate. And I think if people break tasks down into smaller chunks and smaller deadlines, it really helps them see that a problem's coming. And if you take process down to some of its simplest form, I think that's one of the things we've done a good job of identifying in advance is understanding what are those smaller milestones we need to hit along the way. And I think especially when it comes to marketing, people will often underestimate some of like how important some of those smaller chunks are. So if you can maybe talk about what you're starting to put in place for our onboarding so that we can make sure things like access, for example, are out of the way before we kick something off.
Absolutely. I think with onboarding, it's really easy as marketers. We want to start immediately talking about tactics. We want to go, this is exactly how we're going to accomplish what your goals are. These are the specific things we're going to do. We're going to run, Facebook ads. We're going to set up a video shoot on this day and this day. We're going to create a content calendar, and that stuff is fantastic. You need that for the implementation and deployment phases of any project. But I think one of the things that you and I have been working on, and something that we think is really going to work for us moving forward, is starting with a really robust audit of a situation. We don't want to enter into something where we think, just because a client has hired us and they're, put us on a retainer or they're going to give us money, that we can do it. We want to make sure that we join into a project where we know that we can win with them and win for us. So starting with an audit, specifically the tactics audit, which was coined by yourself, which has been working for us on some clients already. It gives us a clear idea of identifying, what works for this business already, and how can we, as you say, reverse engineer their strategy to create these quick wins. So starting with an audit, so we really understand the business problem that the client is facing, presenting that audit to them in areas where we think we can improve, and then moving from there into creating these strategic recommendations, working with the client to talk about their priorities, what can we actually accomplish within this scope, what tactics make sense for their industry, for their clients, and doing all that before we get anywhere near putting these into place. So having that complete understanding and showing our own due diligence in researching, and not just being, money hungry agency, is really something that I think is working for us, and it really shows our clients that we care about their end goal.
Yeah, I think that's probably been one of the biggest changes that we've seen help with successful campaigns is making those types of audits mandatory. And it helps us prevent a lot of big problems. So even if you're managing some of your campaigns internally, I would encourage you to figure out what checklists you need that will make campaigns successful. Simple things like, do we have conversion pixels set up if we're running a conversion campaign on Facebook? Or do we have Google Analytics installed? Do we have backup payment cards inside of the ad account so that if one declines for whatever reason, our ad account doesn't get adversely affected? So even some of those simple checklists, if you don't have a robust process, just small checklists when you're launching a campaign or even launching a post to make sure they have the right copy, the right image, etc., is going to go a long, long way. And it took us a while to get to the point where we had some of these checklists in place, but I can tell where we are now versus where we were, 18 months ago. It's a huge difference. It makes life a lot easier for people.
Absolutely. I mean, even just in when I first started to where we are now, it feels like I'm a lot more confident starting on new projects. There's times where I can jump on client meetings now, and I don't need you there, for example. Obviously,
Mhm.
there's times when I know if we're talking about chaos today, there is a time and place where you should escalate and bring someone in above your pay grade to handle a situation. But I think we've done a really good job of putting Nithya and myself in a position where we have resources now where we know how to solve issues for the most part without needing to pull in a ton of people and take people's time away from the stuff that's more important. So it's been really great just to see that over the last 4 months.
I'll be honest, I'm super lucky because I have a really amazing team. But even as a leader, it was challenging at first to give autonomy to both of you, just to give you the opportunity to solve the problems on your own. But the results we see of letting you guys solve problems. So if there's any leaders watching this, I would encourage you, give your team some autonomy to handle some challenges. Now, we follow a process called traction. I'm sure many of you are aware of it, but being able to use those issues lists and then assigning and allowing the team to work through those challenges, one, for me, frees up my time to help really focus and grow the business, which is, I think, what we're seeing now. But more importantly, I think it allows people, and Ben, you can chime in, I mean, like how it helps you grow being able to find different solutions.
It just gave me a ton of confidence as a project manager to know that I have handled a situation that, probably coming into the job, I would have felt like, oh my gosh, I need to reach out for every step of the way, and once you do that once, you kind of feel like you can do it a million times. And it doesn't mean that you should be naive. There are situations where I should reach out to you. And there's reasons where, a client would much rather speak to the president of a company than just the project manager. But I think we found a really good balance of creating that relationship with our clients, and they understand, both of our roles in the project.
That's awesome. The one thing I will say is there's no big fear of failure. And I've joked internally, usually when we have our meetings, my wife worked as a pediatric nurse and regularly was working on organ transplants. And I think a lot of times in marketing, we feel like things are life and death, and they're not. And usually, if we just take a minute, take a deep breath, we've not come across a problem that's not solvable. And that's not an
Absolutely.
excuse to be complacent with anything or not, be on time. But I think a lot of times when we talk about chaos, if we just, everybody just takes a minute, takes a deep breath, I think every solution has a way to be resolved if we just slow down and look for like the best options and ways to solve it.
I think that is my favorite quote that I've heard from you since I've been at the company is you comparing our work to what your wife does. And you're right, it doesn't mean we need to be complacent, but I think adding to your own stress is only going to add to the chaos. And so, it's a military thing to not, make things worse by being stressed out in it. You need to be able to handle yourself in the chaos. And so if you can smile through a chaotic situation, your client is going to feel a lot more comfortable, and they're going to feel like they're in great hands. And you yourself, you're going to be able to handle the situation without, making an impulsive decision or something reactionary or emotional. You're able to take a step back and keep the logic flowing.
So the one other thing I think we continue to do is look at process as an evolution, not a finite thing. So every time we go through a project and we learn a new or better way to do something, we try to look at how we can implement it pretty quickly, without throwing the whole thing. How do you find managing that process, or like applying, hey, this may work, but let's wait, versus, yeah, let's put that in right away? Like, how do you evaluate those decisions?
I think I'm very lucky in my role because of some of the robust long-term projects that we have at Giant Goat and through our sister companies as well. So when we take on a new client, there's a lot of historical situations that we can pull from. There's a client we're working on right now where we were in a meeting yesterday, and we're talking about specifically how we did something similar for another client, and we're applying that and moving the chain forward and adapting it. I found it very helpful to talk to some of our senior project managers within the RR46, and just be able to kind of understand, what has worked in the past, and then try to apply that to what's working now, or maybe what's not working now. Um, but I think, having that historical data has been probably the most helpful part in that, and then having the leniency to be able to grow and adapt from you, and Nithya.
That's awesome. So, what's one tip you can get as a PM to the people watching on how you manage the chaos, especially when you say, hey, like we have multiple deadlines all at the same time, urgent requests, a team who might feel like they're under stress? How do you help manage that chaos? And what's some takeaways that people can use to manage it on their side?
Immediately when I start feeling overwhelmed, I create my own checklists. So it's, client name and the specific task for each one, and I get them in front of me so I can visualize it. Because when you're trying to keep track of it in your mind, that's when you start, feeling the sweat on the back of your neck, your hands start shaking, and that sort of thing. And I said this next part in my previous episode with the Go Marketing Show, is be as proactively honest as you can. So if I feel like I can't do something, I need to tell you before you realize that I couldn't do it because I tried to do it. Or if we can't meet a deadline with a client, I need to tell the client immediately before we don't meet the deadline. So that proactive honesty, and truthfulness is probably the number one thing you can do as a project manager. Because if you don't meet a deadline, or if you make a mistake, people generally don't mind that part. They mind if you tried to cover your own, for lack of a better word, if you try to cover up. So keep that honesty flowing, keep that communication flowing, and any chaotic situation, I believe you'll be able to handle.
Awesome. All right, everybody, you guys have a great weekend. Ben, you off to the golf course this weekend?
Sunday, 22 and sunny.
Beauty. Enjoy it. Everyone have an awesome weekend.
Take care.